Actually, I will say this about the findings of 1.8 million to 2.7 million non-citizens as distinguished from illegal aliens. Non-citizens is a broader category that includes illegal aliens. I'll get two responses when this gets out to the public. A lot of people will say, wow, that's terrible. And a lot of people will say, that's too small a number. I know there must be 10 million. I see 5 million in my own state. The population of voting age citizens in the United States is now just under 20 million. It's probably by this time over 20 million. About 9% of the national voting age population. That population has tripled since 1980, even in spite of generous naturalization processes. About 55% of all non-citizens are illegal aliens. The remaining 45%, 48%, something like that, consist of legal resident aliens. That's the green card guys. And the long-staying and temporary visa holders. We have people now who come to the United States in great numbers on visas that are ostensibly temporary, but they can spend the rest of their lives here, and many do. And I've always speculated those that really are that attached to us sooner or later are going to want to vote. Most of the evidence so far of voting by non-citizens has been local and anecdotal. Nationwide or statewide estimates of the non-citizen vote are rare. This report, my report, seeks to estimate at least the order of magnitude of the non-citizen vote and the areas of heaviest presence. I suspect you know what those states are, concentrated on California, home to a quarter million of all non-citizens, a quarter of all non-citizens, Texas, Florida, and New York. A main method that I invented, and I literally invented it, I don't know if it has any scientific validity, is to look for over-registration, is my term for it, over-registration. That is a disproportionate number of registered voters when compared to the actual population of eligible voters in that jurisdiction derived from census data. This report determines the vote-eligible population, VEP, vote-eligible population, in each jurisdiction by the simple matter of simply subtracting the non-citizen adult population in the census from the overall voting age population also given in the census. And there are other ways to look for disproportionate registration by using polling data. For example, consider first a Florida example of over-registration. In Miami-Dade County in 2006, 88.4% of the putatively citizen Hispanic population 18 and over, roughly about a little less than half of all Hispanics in that county, was registered to vote. This rate easily surpassed the registration rates of other ethnic groups, including the usually dependably more registration-minded non-Hispanic whites who only could mount 79.9%. The Hispanic rate was also 30% points higher than the rate projected for Hispanic registration by the Pew Hispanic Center in its latest study. If the legitimate Hispanic citizen community had registered at a rate projected by Pew, it would have produced some 354,000 registered voters rather than the actual 536,000. Assuming, as this report does based on census data, that 80% of those registered will vote in national elections, that was the rate back in 2004, apparent over-registration in Miami-Dade would have produced as many as 146,000 questionable voters in 2006. Similarly, looked at Florida congressional districts, 6 different congressional high non-citizen districts in Miami-Dade County and neighboring Broward and Monroe County. In 2000, 3 districts showed rates up to 25 percentage points higher than the state rate. In 2006, 3 were up to 17.6 percentage points higher. In New York City, looking at greater New York City's congressional districts, we find in 2000 and 2006, they had registration rates 4.6% to 17.7% higher than the state average, with 4 exceeding 100%. In other words, more registered voters than population. The report looked extensively at Texas because I have a special fondness. I had worked there and lived there for a while, and because of all political cultures in the United States, this has the most unique blend of the politics of dear old Dixie and the politics of Latin America. And you wonder about that, how that fusion of cultures is working in the case of voter registration. You also have those counties along and close to the Mexican border that have a very high percentage of non-citizens, at least according to the census. After doing this effort, I'm beginning to wonder if the people who actually count votes in Texas have any mind of what's in the census numbers. Texas also has an atypically high population of ineligible felons and enforces the rule against felon voting more rigorously than any other state that I know of. Table 8 shows the state's premier population center and immigration magnet, Harris County, that's Houston, in 2000 showed the largest amount of over-registration, about 250,000. Two small border counties, however, Starr and Presidio, showed the state's, and this survey's, highest percentage of over-registration at 122% and 136.6% respectively. I see I'm running out of time, but I do want to get to one thing that's been very important to me in my findings here, and that was a study I stumbled over done by Loyola Marymount University back in 2007, where they actually polled people, unlike Census and Pew, who never ask people, are you a non-citizen, even though they're asking them about their voting habits. In this case, they did, and people gladly responded. Up to 12% said, yes, I'm a non-citizen, and I have voted. And another 5% said, I don't want to talk about it, or I don't know, I simply don't know. So the 12% sounded reasonable. In fact, the way the question was phrased, it sounded you could easily estimate up to 15%, since the question was asked in such a way that would include people who would not include people who had been voted at some time or were registered in a different jurisdiction. The researcher concluded from these results and the way the question was phrased that we could go to 15%, using the two polls there, the 12% and the 15%, as the likelihood of non-citizen registration in California, expanding. I generalized from Los Angeles to California, and then being daring, I went ahead and generalized the 12% on the low side and the 15% on the high side to all of the United States eventually. In the case of the high estimate, I also factored in an additional 4 million non-citizen illegal aliens, non-citizens, and based on the assumption that many people have that we have up to 20 million illegal aliens in the United States, not just 12 million. And so I factored that in, and that added 4 million to the non-citizen population. Okay. That's where the 1.8 million and the 2.7 million extremes come from, the low and the high. One thing I ran to in working with California statistics was that they keep good records of voting, and yet I found consistently that their statement of the voting eligible population was much, much higher than what you would derive from the Census Bureau. There's a lot of things you could derive from that. Somehow the demographic breakdown has shifted, so there are a lot more people over age 18 in California, or there are a lot less illegal aliens, a lot less non-citizens. But I came to the conclusion that this bulge, which ran up to 1.6 million difference in the 2000 census, showing that many more people eligible to vote in California than you could conclude from the census, really made me believe that maybe my estimates were too high. A bulge of that sort in 2000 could have produced among the ethnic groups and their constituents to turn out the vote, to reward their friends and punish their enemies, to make the vote the weapon that democracy intends it to be. So we have a lot of flaws in our system. Arizona is the only state that's adopted restrictions on registering non-citizens and tried to enforce it. its inability to come up with a satisfactory documentary base to make this screening system work illustrates the problem we're going to have if you're going to confront this at the national level. But I think that 1.8 to 2.7 million is really the thin entering wedge, and we're heading toward a situation where, if we're not careful, we'll simply come to accept non-citizen voting on a mass scale the way we've come to accept illegal immigration itself. A delegitimation process will be underway in our electoral system. Thank you very much.